The sun shined down beautifully into the room as a heartbroken Damien stood by the bed. He gently held his daughter Juliet's motionless hand as tears streamed down his face, feeling her presence for the last time. The young magician, Pomeranian, watched with wide, innocent eyes. She quietly asked Vikier about why the mister in front of them was crying. The Nighthound quietly explained that it was probably because Damien felt a mix of emotions. He was grateful, sorry, and last of all, this was an act of love he did for her. Confused, Pomeranian asked why he was crying since he should be smiling because of his love for her, that he was thankful. The Nighthound simply told the young lady that as she grew up, she would experience many things and hopefully one day understand what the mister was feeling. Hearing those words, Pomeranian could only mutter that it was going to be hard. After the moment of grieving, Damien says thank you to both the Nighthound and Pomeranian. His face was still heavy with grief, but there was a new calm in his expression. He said that thanks to them, he had been able to fulfill his duty as a father one last time. The Nighthound replied that no thanks were needed. Instead, he held out his hand, his eye glowing faintly behind the mask. He reminded Damien that there was something Damien had to give him. Without hesitation, Damien knelt before the Nighthound. With his head bowed, he solemnly declared his oath, promising to give everything he had to the Nighthound. Looking up with firm determination in his now purple eyes, Damien told the Nighthound to tell him what it is he seeks. The Nighthound's answer was simple and chilling. With his red eye glowing with a murderous light, the Nighthound stated the price for his favor. He demanded a head, the head of the bourgeois family's patriarch. In a quiet gazebo overlooking a moonlit garden, a secret meeting took place. Damien de Bourgeois stood with the Nighthound, and our boy introduced the third person there, Dolores, explaining that she was an ally who would be helping them. Damien greeted her formally as the Saintess of Quo Vadis, shaking her hand and remembering that he had last seen her during the University League, and after the passport, he didn't expect to meet her again like this. Shaking Damien's hand, Dolores replied that the honor was all hers. Even so, she was still in disbelief that they had actually managed to secure Director Damien as their insider. Looking right at him, Dolores secretly wondered what could have happened to make him turn against his own family head. Wasting no time, the Nighthound got straight to the point, his red eye glowing underneath the mask. He declared that the reason for their meeting was to create a plan for the assassination of Bartholomew, the head of the bourgeois family. Damien, his expression grim, told them that was the reason he wanted this meeting to take place. He explained that he had used his trusted people within the family to spread rumors about the Oracle Club's incredible success, knowing it would draw his brother's attention. The plan had worked. As a result, he had secured a dinner with Bartholomew himself. Dolores was stunned. She asked if he meant that dinner, the one she had only ever heard about in rumors. Damien confirmed her suspicion. It was the Vault dinner. It's the famous dinner that all influential figures in the capital experience once. He began to explain more details of the vault. The bourgeois family possessed a mysterious vault, a massive 50 cube with unbreakable walls forged from mithril and orichalcum. The vault was a true iron fortress, completely sealed off from the outside world by powerful anti-teleportation magic and filled with mountains of gold and priceless treasures. Finally, Damien revealed the most important piece of information, the key to their plan. He revealed that Bartholomew had a strange way of doing things. Whenever he had an important meeting or meal, he always held it alone inside this vault for exactly 1 hour. Thinking about this, a bead of sweat ran down Dolores' face as she realized what that meant. An entire hour, completely cut off from all outside eyes and ears, was perfect undisturbed chance for their plan. However, she quickly raised a sharp question. She asked Damien why Bartholomew would ever put himself in such a risky position, wondering if he wasn't afraid of being assassinated while locked alone in the vault with a guest. Damien crossed his arms and admitted that while it was a logical concern, he had never once seen his brother show any fear about it. Before Damien could explain further, the Nighthound cut in with a chilling truth. He explained that Bartholomew felt no fear because he was a demon who possessed absolute power. The revelation stunned Damien. He started to stammer, trying to question what he had just heard. The Nighthound showed him a rolled-up document. He told Damien not to worry about that part for now and to focus on what was written on the document before him. The plan was for the Nighthound's team to confront Bartholomew inside the vault. Meanwhile, Damien's crucial role would be to help them with what was written on the document on the outside. The Nighthound leaned in, stressing that Damien's part in the plan was the single most important factor in ensuring Bartholomew's defeat. Damien and Dolores' expressions twisted into pure shock upon seeing the Nighthound's plan on the document. Stuttering in disbelief, Damien realized that this plan went far beyond the bourgeois family alone. Dolores came to the same horrifying conclusion. If this plan was carried out to the end, it would end the entire empire. The scene then shifted to the day of the dinner. The wheels of a wooden carriage creaked as it traveled along a dirt road toward the bourgeois estate. Its weight was heavy due to the huge amount of cargo it was carrying. Inside, Piggy and Sinclair were chatting excitedly with Dolores. Piggy was practically bouncing with joy, saying he still couldn't believe their Oracle Club had taken first place in the investment tournament and that they were now on their way to have dinner with the head of the bourgeois family. He was looking forward to it. He turned to Sinclair, asking if she was excited. With a bright and nervous smile, she enthusiastically agreed, but her happy expression slowly turned a little sad. She quietly added that it would have been great if Vickier could have come with them. Piggy looked confused and asked Sinclair why she had suddenly brought up Vickier. Sinclair explained that Vickier had once promised to visit her family's home, which only surprised Piggy even more. Seeing his reaction, Sinclair quickly brushed it off, saying it was nothing and that she just felt a bit down because Vickier seemed so busy lately. Piggy agreed, adding that he too had found it hard to even share a simple meal with Vickier recently. Suddenly, as if remembering something important, Piggy's attitude changed completely. He excitedly unrolled a long scroll, proudly announcing that he had prepared a full list of questions to ask the head of the bourgeois family. He began enthusiastically listing the topics, which ranged from serious economic questions about the empire's future to simpler curiosities, like what the super rich even ate for their meals. As Piggy and Sinclair chatted on in excitement, completely unaware of the real reason for their visit, Dolores watched them with a quiet, shadowed expression. A wave of guilt washed over her as she thought about the danger she was leading her innocent friends into. "I'm sorry, you guys," she thought to herself, just as their carriage pulled up to the gates of the magnificent bourgeois estate. The massive, ornate gates swung open and the three students were led inside. They stepped into a lavishly decorated waiting room. They were impressed by the quality and state of the room they were in. A well-dressed man with dark hair, acting as their guide, politely told them they should wait here for a moment as he would inform their patriarch of their arrival. After Dolores thanked him, the man bowed slightly and told them to make themselves comfortable before quietly leaving the room. While they waited, Piggy and Sinclair quickly sat on the furniture. Piggy commented on how luxurious everything was, insisting that the sofa alone was 100 times better than their beds back at the academy dorms. Sinclair agreed, noting how unbelievably soft and comfortable the cushions were. Piggy then excitedly asked Sinclair if she had thought of any questions she wanted to ask the head of the bourgeois family. Sinclair replied that there was just one thing she was really curious about, but she couldn't say what it was. Her quiet, evasive answer only seemed to fire up Piggy more. He argued that this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to meet the wealthiest man in the empire, and that they should try to gain as much knowledge as possible. As her friends continued their innocent chatter, Dolores lowered her gaze, her face tight with guilt and strain. Unseen by the others, she discreetly took out a small vial and poured its contents, a sleeping potion, into a nearby pitcher while her hands were trembling. She knew she had to make sure her friends were fast asleep before the dinner began to keep them safe from the danger that was coming. Her thoughts were interrupted when Piggy suddenly wondered aloud if Bartholomew would like the gifts they had prepared. He suggested they open the boxes to make sure everything was in order. Panicking at the thought of them discovering the truth too soon, Dolores lunged forward, shouting for them to wait. Piggy and Sinclair froze, completely startled and confused by their vice president's sudden outburst. Quickly composing herself, Dolores held a tray with 3 cups of tea. She told them she would check the gifts herself and that they should drink some tea and rest for a while. Her smile was visibly strained, a clear sign of the immense pressure weighing on her. But her friends, still a bit confused, timidly agreed, drinking the cup of tea without suspecting a thing. A short while later, after they had finished their tea, a sudden and overwhelming wave of drowsiness washed over both Piggy and Sinclair. They began yawning and stretching, wondering why they were suddenly so sleepy, especially when the long-awaited dinner was just about to begin. As the sleeping potion took hold, Dolores watched her friend with a fragile sense of relieved success. Sinclair, still trying to fight off the effects, yawned and said she needed to get some cold water to wake herself up. Just then, the dark-haired guide knocked on the door to the room, asking if they had rested well. As he stepped inside, he informed the students that their patriarch was waiting and that he was going to escort them to his location. Seeing the 2 unconscious students, he asked what had happened. With a nervous laugh, Dolores quickly came up with an excuse. She explained that her friends had been very nervous and tired and had fallen asleep as soon as they relaxed and drank some tea. In her mind, she apologized to them again, knowing this was the only way to keep them safe. She then informed the guide that she would represent their club and meet with the family head alone. The man accepted her explanation without question and agreed to lead her there at once. Dolores followed the guide down a long, sunlit corridor. Behind them, two workers pushed handcarts carrying the large wooden crates that contained their gifts. Eventually, they arrived in much darker, more scary part of the mansion. Before them stood a pair of enormous, intimidating metal doors, two large ones the size of giants, and two smaller versions the size fit for humans. The guide announced that this was the place. A bead of sweat trickled down Dolores' face as she stared at the massive structure. With a chill, she realized that this was the famous vault. As the colossal doors began to creak open, a terrifying thought crossed her mind. The sheer size of the entrance felt like a warning, as if declaring that these doors were never meant to be used by ordinary humans. Standing at the threshold of the massive vault, Dolores listened as the guide informed her that she would have to proceed alone from this point on. He added that the gifts they had brought would be placed inside for safekeeping. Dolores understood that the being she was about to face was as strange and overwhelming as the doors before her. With a final, chilling wish for her to enjoy her meal, the guide stepped back as the colossal doors began to swing shut, leaving Dolores to face her fate alone. Plunged into almost complete darkness, she nervously looked around the vast, empty space and called out, tentatively asking if the head of the family was there. As she took a cautious step forward, her foot slipped on something scattered across the floor. With a small cry, she lost her balance and tumbled backward, landing hard on a pile of what felt like small metallic objects. Sitting up and rubbing her sore hip, she wondered what she could have possibly tripped over in the dark. She picked up one of the objects and realized it was a gold coin. Just as she examined it more closely, a brilliant, blinding golden light suddenly erupted, flooding the entire chamber. Bathed in the radiant glow, Dolores could only stare in wide-eyed astonishment as the source of the light was revealed. The immense vault was filled with literal mountains of shimmering gold coins. In the very center of this sea of unimaginable wealth stood a single long dining table, elegantly set for a feast. Dolores, still sitting on the floor amid the treasure, was left utterly speechless by the overwhelming sight. A deep, commanding voice broke the silence, welcoming the saintess. The speaker, a large, powerfully built man with a long blonde beard, held a glass of red wine in his hand. Surrounded by flickering candlelight, reflecting off endless mountains of gold and jewels, Dolores nervously took her seat at the grand dining table across from the imposing figure. Her hands trembled as she tried to compose herself, knowing what was to come later on. She was face to face with Bartholomew Jew Bourgeois, the wealthiest man in the whole world. She knew his public identity as the head of the Bourgeois family, one of the 7 great families, but she also knew his true, hidden nature. He was a demon wearing human skin. Bartholomew began the conversation by praising her, saying that her skills were truly impressive. When Dolores looked up, startled, he explained that he had reviewed her records of investments. He pointed out her decision to invest a huge sum into Cindy, a trader from the Western jungle. He knew that most people would have hesitated on such a decision. He admitted that her decisiveness and precise insight had even managed to impress him. He even tells her that the person he needed to learn from was right in front of his eyes. Flustered by the unexpected praise, Dolores could only manage a quiet thank you. As Bartholomew watched her across the lavishly set table, she quickly remembered the night hound's warning. He had told her that Bartholomew was a master of words and that she had to stay on guard to avoid being led astray. Realizing she had almost let his smooth tone disarm her, she forced herself to refocus. Regaining her composure, she calmly replied that he was far too kind. Bartholomew paused for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, in a casual tone, he dropped a piece of information that shocked Dolores. He mentioned that Cardinal Humbert had visited him earlier that day, adding that he seemed to be meeting many key figures from the Quo Vadis family lately. The name drop hit the young saint's heart. Her face froze in a mix of shock and horror. She already knew that Cardinal Humbert was working with the cults and heretics, but she had never imagined that his corruption reached as far as the head of the bourgeois family. Noticing her expression, Bartholomew tilted his head and asked if his words had made her uncomfortable. He pointed out that, as the saintess, she belonged to the New Testament faction of the church. He explained that he had deep connections with the priests from the Old Testament faction and said it would be a shame if she chose to distance herself from him because of political differences. Reaching out a hand in a gesture of false friendship, he continued to weave his story. He claimed that he wished to be on good terms with the New Testament priests as well. He knew that the New Testament faction treats his relationship with the Old Testament the wealth they've accumulated as something inhumane, wicked, and horrific. He argued that because of this prejudice, their good deeds were never acknowledged. Urging Dolores to think about it, Taking a sip of his wine, he asked if using a large sum of money for a large cause is not meaningful in and of itself. Dolores' expression was hardening. She repeated the demon's words, telling it that it seems humans and demons have different definitions of the word cause. Her words seemed to confuse Bartholomew for a moment. The time for pretending was simply over. Dolores slammed her hands on the table. Her fear burned away and replaced by raw anger. She began to list Damien's monstrous crimes, his deal with the demon Dantalion, which involved feeding him with orphans, his creation of the ridiculous exemption system that infected Quo Vadis, turning them corrupt, his support and control of countless heretics and cults to create an internal division in his attempt to seize control of the religiously holy Quo Vadis family. Leaning forward, she declared that the only reason he could possibly call these horrific acts good was because of his true identity. With her eyes blazing with certainty, she shouted at him and directly accused him of what he was. He was a demon. For a brief moment, a heavy silence filled the vault. Then a slow, sinister smile spread across Bartholomew's face, and a low chuckle escaped his lips. The chuckle quickly swelled into a booming, insane laugh that echoed through the vast golden chamber. The force of his laughter was so intense that the mountains of gold coins around them began to tremble and shift. Dolores clutched her head in pain as the thunderous sound battered her ears. Damien's laughter was piercing through her skull. Through the terrifying noise, she shouted back at him, demanding to know if he wasn't afraid. She asked why he showed no fear of a visitor who knew the true monstrous nature of both him and his allies. Bartholomew's laughter finally died down, replaced by a scornful sneer. He scoffed at the idea of fear, saying it was impossible. He rose from his seat and loomed over the terrified Dolores, his voice dripping with arrogance as he asked what human in this world could possibly frighten him. In an instant, he was leaning over her, his face twisted into a monstrous grin, his sheer presence crushing down on her. But just as he was about to continue his torment, he froze. A flicker of confusion crossed his face as he sensed something was wrong. His gaze shifted toward the entrance of the vault where the wooden carts that had carried the gifts now lay broken. From the shadows near the shattered crates, a pair of intense, glowing red eyes glared back at him, making Bartholomew's own demonic eyes widen in genuine shock. An immense, suffocating pressure suddenly filled the entire room, catching the demon lord completely off guard. A violent surge of red, demonic energy erupted from one of the piles of gold coins. From within that explosion of power, a new figure stepped out. It was the Night Hound, his entire body wrapped in a menacing red aura. He declared that the one human Bartholomew should fear was standing right there. Bartholomew instinctively moved between the newcomer and Dolores, stunned by the immense power radiating from a mere human body. He also sensed a faint, familiar scent mixed into that aura, the smell of demon blood. As he put the pieces together, he finally realized who stood before him. With his own glowing red eyes fixed on the intruder, Bartholomew asked if he was the infamous Night Hound, the mysterious figure who had been wreaking havoc in the capital. To answer his question, the Night Hound unleashed the demonic blade in his arm, revealing to the demon that he had come here to kill him, the patriarch of the bourgeois family. The battle was about to begin. No more words needed. The Night Hound's assassination has started. He leaped from the top of the pile of golden coins. His reflection caught in the demon's eyes as it slowly watched death approach it. The Night Hound declared that he had come to kill the sixth corpse demon. The first clash of their powers triggered a massive explosion that sent gold coins flying in every direction. Reacting instantly, Dolores summoned a protective barrier of golden light to shield herself. Bartholomew, completely unfazed by the impact, let out an amused chuckle. He remarked that his opponent seemed to know how to handle a blade. Before the Night Hound could follow up, Bartholomew summoned a demonic sword of his own and effortlessly blocked the attack. He boasted that he was quite skilled in swordsmanship himself. The two warriors clashed in a furious exchange of blows. The Night Hound swung his red dagger with incredible speed, but Bartholomew parried every strike, forcing the Night Hound to retreat and rethink his approach. As he eyed Bartholomew's weapon, a shocking realization hit him. That sword is so sharp, it can cut through steel just by being placed on top of it. However, it corrupts the wielder and turns them into a tyrant as a prize. It's a weapon of the Baskerville family, a weapon that should have been stored in the deepest floor of the estate. The legendary sword, Bamong. Looking at it being held, Vikier could only wonder how the demon had gotten its hands on Bartholomew, explained with a smug grin that the human he currently possessed in his youth had been such a talented swordsman that the previous head of the Baskerville family had been deeply impressed. He claimed that the former patriarch had begged him to become his student and had even gifted him the legendary sword Bamong. He called the former patriarch of the Baskerville unlucky for gifting such a sword to someone who was easily possessed. He then launched himself forward, leaping across the piles of gold to attack. The Night Hound met the charge head-on, blocking the legendary sword with Beelzebub. A furious exchange of blows followed, their weapons clashing in a blur of red and gold light as Bartholomew unleashed a relentless series of strikes. As they fought, Bartholomew's curiosity grew. He questioned the Night Hound mid-fight, demanding to know how a mere human could know about them, the 10 elite corpses, and how he killed 4 of his comrades so far. Their blades continued to crash together, the ringing of steel echoing through the vault as the demon knocked Vic Year's blade upwards, giving Bartholomew the chance. He charged forward with all his strength, his demonic sword glowing with immense power. Shouting that the Night Hound's arrogance ends, the blade found its mark, piercing straight through the Night Hound's chest in what looked like a fatal blow. From across the room, Dolores cried out in horror, screaming the Night Hound's name. Blood splattered across the golden floor. The demon whispered, saying that there was no need to worry as he was going to devour the Night Hound's corpse. With a cruel grin, he promised to keep his skull in the vault until it fully rotted away, telling him to consider it a great honor. But just as he was about to deliver the final blow, a calm, clear voice cut through the air, calling him pathetic. That word stopped Bartholomew in his tracks, his arrogant expression instantly twisting into pure disbelief. The Night Hound, still impaled by the sword, held onto his blade as his body slowly started to recover. He called out Bartholomew's lousy swordsmanship, despite having the Baskervilles family's treasure, and to the previous patriarch who gifted the sword to him. Both of them were simply pathetic in the eyes of the Night Hound, the greatest Baskerville clan member to exist. Bartholomew thought of the Night Hound's words as all talk. After all, he couldn't even clash swords with him and found it difficult to keep up with the demon. Plus, who's the one that has a sword through their chest? Not the demon, but the bloodhound instead. The demon's arrogance shifted into confusion when he tried to pull his sword back and felt it refused to move. This was an moment for the demon. The Night Hound had clamped down on the blade with his bare, bloody hand, fingers digging into the metal as he held it in place. The Night Hound then asked if Bartholomew was still sure he was all talk as he began to focus his power, pouring his red mana into Beelzebub. Bartholomew's eyes widened in disbelief at the overwhelming strength gathering around his young opponent. He recognized the technique at once as the legendary solid, a skill that only a true swordmaster could use, and he couldn't understand how this boy had climbed to that height. Before Bartholomew could process it, the Night Hound unleashed his own ultimate technique. Channeling all that power, he released the Baskervilles' 7th sword form, sending a storm of devastating red energy slashes ripping through the chamber. The attack culminated in a massive, vortex-like explosion of red energy that tore through the vault, shockwaves hurling gold coins and debris in every direction. Watching from a safe distance, Dolores was completely stunned. She realized that the Night Hound had gotten far stronger now than when he had fought during their battle against the demon Dantalian, and she couldn't help but wonder what had driven such a drastic leap in his power. When the dust finally settled, the Night Hound stood ready, red aura still swirling around him like a living storm. His gaze stayed locked on his opponent. Bartholomew, now heavily wounded and bleeding, had to use his sword as a crutch just to remain upright. The demon's entire left side of its body had been ripped to shreds. The Night Hound could see that Bartholomew had survived only by pulling his foot back in a moment and endured the 7th technique. Looking at its current state, our boy knew that the demon would have a difficult time continuing this fight. Blood dripping all over his face, Bartholomew had to admit to himself that the Night Hound's previous victories hadn't been pure luck. He actually did have the skill to kill his comrades. Even so, a defiant grin crept back onto his face. He began to taunt them, asking if they truly believed they would walk out of this place alive. He explained that the vault could never be opened from the inside and that it operated on a strict timer. Only when the hour was up would the doors be unlocked from the outside. He continued his threat, laughing as he painted a picture of his guards swarming in the moment the doors opened. At that moment, he planned on reporting the 2 of them to the Imperial garrison, but his crazed laughter and telling of what was to come was cut short. Holy light, a powerful blast of divine energy raised him, causing the demon to scream in pain. Dolores, seeing an opening while his guard was down, thrust out her hand and shouted the holy spell while holding up the mirror of truth, an item that reveals the real face of anyone reflected in it. She questions the demon if his followers would still trust him once they saw his true self. Dolores continues to rain down holy magic on the demon. Bartholomew cried out in agony, stunned that she possessed such a potent holy artifact. As the mirror's light grew brighter, The reflection of his human face began to melt away, revealing the horrifying demonic visage lurking beneath. With his disguise fully shattered, Bartholomew dropped all pretense. A massive, grotesque grin stretched across his newly revealed demonic purple face. With an amused and threatening tone, he admitted that their preparations had been far more thorough than he expected. His body began to twist and turn. His right arm swelled, warping into a grotesque, monstrous limb ending in sharp yellow claws. He slammed the massive hand down onto the golden floor with crushing force, sending ripples through the mountains of coins. He grumbled to himself, irritated, yet expected to deal only with the Night Hound and never imagined that the Saintess of Quo Vadis family would be involved as well, making things interesting. Standing beside the Night Hound, Dolores stared in terror at the monstrous transformation taking place before her eyes. Purple, fleshy tendrils began to creep up his sword, Bamong, fusing the legendary weapon into the demon's flesh. It couldn't believe that it had to show its true form to mere humans. His entire body shuddered and swelled, muscle and sinew twisting as his power surged higher. Two large, leathery wings tore through the back of his clothes, unfolding to their full, menacing span. Not to be outdone, the Night Hound braced himself for the next stage of the boss fight. He tightened his grip around his own demonic weapon as it was covered in solid aura. Clasping her hands together, she sank into self-doubt, questioning whether she could truly call it forth again now that it mattered most. Her mind flashed through all the times the Night Hound had thrown himself in a battle against demons alone. She remembered her own moment of awakening, and a new determination rose in her chest. She knew she had to do what she could. She pledged to herself that she could not let him fight this battle by himself. Her doubt burned away, replaced by firm resolve. A holy cross-shaped light gleamed in her eye as she vowed that she would never let the Night Hound fight alone again. Finding her courage, she stood behind him and stretched out her hand, declaring loudly that she would try. A brilliant golden radiance began to surge from her as she recited a verse. God Lune is a strong castle, and he becomes the shield and sword who saves us from great hardship. I will fail if I rely on my strength alone. May someone who is strong fight in my stead. Who will it be? This holy name is repeating the part about a name. Dolores slowly realized that there was a problem. She turned to the Night Hound and confessed that the blessing would be far more effective if she knew his true name. He stiffened, taken aback, realizing he couldn't possibly reveal his identity at such a critical moment. Their fragile focus shattered as the demon Belial, already fully restored, charged straight toward them. The Night Hound was stunned by the speed of the demon's recovery, as the arm he destroyed was now coming to smack him. Belial's massive arm slammed into the Night Hound with crushing force and without mercy. The blow was devastating. The Night Hound was sent flying through the air and crashed through multiple towers of gold coins. Our boy could only sit against a pillar in the safe, his arm and legs twisted in ways that were unholy. Blood coming out of places where it shouldn't be coming out from. The demon, however, paid no attention to his fallen foe. He raised his massive, grotesque arm, which had been combined with a legendary sword Balmon. Belial stood before the Saintess, who had fallen to her knees out of fear. With a massive roar, Belial issues the death sentence for the young Saintess, hoping to bring an end to her story. Dolores could only look up, her face frozen in pure terror, as the massive killing blow was about to come down upon her. This is as she thought. Sixth corpse demon Belial glared down at the defenseless Saintess, roaring for her to die. Frozen in terror, Dolores stood as tears streamed down her face, quietly accepting her fate. As the massive blade arm swung down to deliver the killing blow, she could only think that everything was over. But just before the blade could connect, a brilliant streak of red light tore through the air, forming a massive and complicated magic circle directly in the path of the attack, catching the demon completely off guard. The magic circle, with a large reptilian eye at its center, effortlessly blocked the devastating strike. A calm, ancient voice flowed out from the circle, greeting Belial and telling the demon that it had been a while. Stunned by the sudden intervention, Belial stammered. Upon hearing the voice, he slowly started to notice who had blocked his death blow. The hovering circle, standing protectively in front of the shocked Dolores, was revealed to be the power of the demon Decarabia. Belial repeated the name in disbelief, his expression twisting into fury. He accused his ally of betraying their kind, called Decarabia a dirty rat, and demanded to know if it was prepared to face the wrath of its people, if it could handle the endless fury that would come from the gates of destruction. Decarabia's I remained calm. It replied that betrayal was the wrong word. It explained that it had never truly belonged to any one side to begin with. It had simply formed a contract with a human, and now its vocation changed depending on the contractor's needs. Decorabia then declared its new purpose. For the next 1,000 years, it would serve as a shield for this woman and for all of humanity. Decorabia dismissed the threat, saying they could worry about that when the time came. It reminded Belial that the 10 elite corpse demons were decreasing in both power and numbers, and that the unsettling truth was that he was the one acting tough. It asked Belial if he couldn't feel the tingling at the back of his neck. Confused, Belial snapped back asking what it meant, but the question was only a distraction. Seizing that brief opening, the now recovered Night Hound leaped into the air behind the demon and unleashed a powerful slash of red energy, cutting straight across Belial's back. Landing lightly, the Night Hound reflected that his true aim had been to behead the demon. However, the strike had been too shallow to finish the job. Belial turned, completely shocked. He had fully expected the Night Hound to die, his organs obliterated by the force of that last strike. And so he activated his Golden Veins ability. A swarm of gold coins rushed over his back, rapidly healing the deep gash. The Night Hound stood firm, though he was clearly wounded and bleeding from the chest. The reason for his survival was the demonic sword Beelzebub, which possessed the S-rank ability Immortal Basilisk and the A+ rank Silent Heal. Realizing that his opponent was far from an ordinary human, Belial acknowledged that this would not be an easy battle. Meanwhile, Dolores was safe, but trapped inside the protective red magic circle summoned by Decorabia. She thanked the ancient demon for saving her life, then immediately pleaded with it to release the shield magic so she could go and help the Night Hound. Decorabia flatly refused, its single eye narrowing as it explained that it had received only one command, to keep the saint safe. It could not move beyond that order, much to Dolores' shock and frustration. She found herself questioning what this strange being that had appeared from nowhere really was. Then a realization struck her. She could feel the Night Hound's own mana flowing through Decorabia. She understood that this protective shield wasn't the demon's idea. It was a safeguard the Night Hound himself had arranged in advance to make sure she survived. Powerless to intervene, she could only watch from behind the barrier as the furious battle raged on outside. The Night Hound and Belial clashed in a brutal, high-speed exchange. Their attacks lit up the Golden Vault, each impact sending shockwaves through the mountains of treasure as both fighters traded blows and injuries. Belial's monstrous form seemed to revel in the violence, a cruel smirk spreading across his face even as he bled. The battle raged on. The Night Hound and the demon locked in a relentless storm of strikes. With its superior raw power, Belial landed a devastating blow that hurled the Night Hound backward across the chamber. Using Beelzebub to anchor himself to the ground, the Night Hound slowly began to recover from the attack. He started to assess the situation. The Night Hound couldn't believe that as someone who had reached the intermediate level of Sword Master and surpassed the threshold of supremacy, he was right now struggling in this fight. The Night Hound's mind raced, measuring this monster against all the elite corpse demons he had fought, and came to a realization. Belial was, without question, the most difficult and overwhelming opponent he had ever encountered. He quickly analyzed the issue. Every time he attacked, Belial absorbed more wealth and became stronger. The amount of gold inside this vault didn't look like it had decreased at all from the start of their fight. The longer this battle went on, the more unfavorable the situation became for the Night Hound. He needed to end this fight quickly. But compared to King Corsair the Baskerville, the Undead Knight, also known as the Undertaker of the Grave of Swords, Belial was definitely beatable. He only had to endure a little longer as time was on his side. Meanwhile, still confined within Decorabia's barrier, Dolores refused to remain a helpless spectator. She began to chant a powerful prayer, her voice firm with conviction. Despite the demons who swarm this land, don't be afraid and stand your ground. Truth will prevail. The truth will live on, and this land shall be eternal. As she finished her prayer, a massive wall of holy fire erupted from the ground, engulfing Belial in a torrent of golden flames. Dolores had cast the spell, Wall of Divine Fire. Belial, engulfed in the sacred flames, was unaffected. He asked if she really believed that such simple holy magic could stop him now. With a single powerful roar, the demon unleashed his own dark energy, completely shattering Dolores's holy magic, showing how useless it was against him. Dolores was pushed back slightly by the force of the roar, stunned that her wall of divine fire had been broken so easily. But her resolve did not falter. Undeterred, she began to cast the spell once more, her prayer rising with renewed conviction. Her defiance drew the full, murderous attention of the demon. Snarling, Belial mockingly roared that if she was so eager to die first, he would gladly grant her wish. Just as the demon was about to strike Dolores, The night hound appeared behind him in a flash of red. With his blade aimed and ready, he declared that he was Belial's true opponent. A vicious smile spread across Belial's face as his eyes began to glow with an intense golden light. Suddenly, golden snake-like tendrils of energy erupted from the mountains of coins, shooting toward the night hound and coiling tightly around his body, binding him in place. He struggled against the magical restraints, muscles straining as he tried to break free from the sudden trap. Belial raised a massive, twisted arm into the air. The tower of gold coins began to swarm all around the demon, transforming into golden currents. He declared to the saintess that within this vault, both the night hound's attacks and her childish divine magic were utterly useless. With a final, menacing glare, he told her to spend her last moments regretting the day she refused to accept the corrupted wealth created through human greed and to die as she was ripped to shreds. The barrage of golden death rained down on Dolores, who was still trapped within Decoravia's protective circle. The golden death was coming fast and strong, ready to kill. Each time a wave of golden coins swept past her, it cut and tore through her skin and clothes, drawing blood she had no way to stop. Tears flooded her eyes once again as she braced for the incoming pain. The wet sound of blood splattering echoed throughout the vault, and it was that silence that followed which made her slowly open one eye. Though Dolores was hurt by the sheer force of the assault, she was not the one who had taken the brunt of the attack. Tears streamed down her face as she looked up, her clothes splattered with fresh blood. Standing directly in front of her, having shielded her with his own body, was the night hound. The golden projectiles had pierced him in multiple places, leaving him grievously wounded. Dolores could only stare in utter shock and disbelief. The night hound had absorbed the full impact of Belial's attack for her. Blood spilling from the night hound's wounds, spattering across the gold coins beneath him, was horrifying. Yet he remained standing. His body was skewered by golden tendrils forged from the treasure itself, the remnants of a blow he had taken to shield Dolores from the demon's attack. Still, he refused to fall. Below, Dolores could only stare up at him in horror, her lips trembling as she whispered his name. Trapped behind Decoravia, guilt crushed her chest. He had been wounded protecting her. Again, the night hound gritted his teeth and seized the golden tendrils lodged in his body. A surge of crimson aura erupted across his hands, then his entire form. With a violent twist, he crushed the tendrils into dust and tore himself free. Dolores saw the state he was in and knew immediately he needed healing. She pressed both hands against the barrier and began to cast her spell. Suspended within a circle of radiant light, she realized the barrier had already been restored. Her voice broke as she pleaded with him to let her out, insisting she could still help. But the night hound, as its master, had already reinforced Decoravia. He had poured more mana into it than before. The barrier was stronger now, far stronger, and it would not break so easily. He glanced back at her and gave a firm command. Do not leave the shield under any circumstance. His voice hardened as he warned her. It was far too dangerous outside. Then he turned away without waiting for her reply and hurled himself back into the battle, charging toward the storm of golden energy gathering around the demon. Dolores could only watch him go, her face twisted with desperation, tears spilling freely. Belial struck again. Countless razor-sharp golden blades materialized in the hanging overhead like a storm poised to fall. The night hound steadied himself. His red eyes burned as he tightened his grip on his blade. Then the storm descended. Blades rained down in a relentless torrent, but he met them head-on. His weapon moved in a blur, carving arcs of crimson light that collided with the falling gold. Red and gold clashed violently, then shattered. The golden assault broke apart, fragments scattering across the vault. Amid the falling debris, the night hound stood unmoving. His gaze locked onto Belial. Still standing, still ready. Unimpressed, Belial raised its grotesque arm. Then it struck. The massive blade came crashing down, slamming into the night hound with devastating force, and sending him hurtling across the vault. He hit the ground hard, skidding through scattered coins as another brutal impact tore through his body. Blood splashed across his face. Still, he forced himself up. Belial roared, its patience gone. The treasure obeyed. A colossal fist of solid gold formed above the night hound, towering over him as it rose into the air. Then it dropped. The sheer weight of it tore through the aiming to crush him completely. From the ground, the night hound looked up, and for the first time, shock flashed across his face. Inside the barrier, Dolores fought her own battle, refusing to remain a spectator. She slammed her fists against the shield again and again. It did nothing. Her hands split open. Blood ran down her arms. Still, she struck it again and again. A veil of holy light covered her eyes as she poured everything she had into breaking through. The barrier did not yield. A pool of blood gathered beneath her feet. Decorabia watched silently. Its single eye lingered on her ruined hands as it spoke, calmly noting her condition. The words hit harder than any blow. Dolores's strength gave out. She collapsed to her knees. Her gaze fell to her trembling, blood-stained hands, and despair swallowed her whole. She hated it, hated that she could do nothing. Kneeling there, she thought of her power, of her faith, of everything it was supposed to stand for, and how useless it was. Her divine power born from pure belief, from justice, from compassion, meant nothing here before a demon fueled by endless greed, by Mammon itself. It was pathetic. Her thoughts drifted back to Dantalion. She had believed she had surpassed her limits then, that she had awakened something greater within herself. She thought this time would be different. She thought she could stand beside him, fight beside him, but those fragile hopes shattered, replaced by the memory of his voice ordering her to stay behind, calling the battlefield too dangerous as he leapt forward alone. A burden, that was all she was. Tears blurred her vision again. Frustration twisted into self-loathing as she cursed her own weakness. Meanwhile, the battle raged on. The Nighthound rose. Blood streamed steadily from his wound, dripping onto the golden floor, but he ignored it. Step by step, he walked through his own blood. Then he charged. His blade flared crimson as he surged forward, closing the distance in an instant. One strike, clean, precise, Belial's massive arms separated from its body, but he didn't stop. He pressed forward. Then his eyes widened. Belial was already there. The demon moved faster than expected, closing the gap instantly and delivering a brutal counterattack. The impact sent the Nighthound flying. He crashed hard, his body slamming against the ground before skidding to a stop near the barrier protecting Dolores. A deep wound tore open across his chest. Blood poured out. Leaning against the barrier, he spat blood, his breathing uneven. This was bad. He clicked his tongue, forcing himself to assess the situation. His mana was draining too quickly. Maintaining his solid aura was already taxing, but sustaining Decorabia's reinforced barrier was consuming far more than he had calculated. And worse, even the Basilisk's regenerative ability was weakening. Tom alone would not save them. If he could not deliver a decisive blow to Belial, who had already demonstrated its ability to regenerate using the gold itself, then everything they had endured would mean nothing. There's only one option. He had to use it. Every last drop of mana. A finale technique. But doubt crept in. He had not perfected it. Would it even work? Then, a soft warmth brushed against him. Golden light. He turned, startled. Dolores. Behind the barrier, she knelt with both arms outstretched, golden light pouring from her hands. Her palms were torn open, bloodied from her struggle, but her expression had changed. Resolve. She said she would fight with him. She refused to stand by and watch him suffer alone any longer. He tried to stop her, told her she had already done enough, but she cut him off. Her voice did not waver. It was because she was weak that she had to act. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at her glowing hands and asked him, did he truly see her as nothing but a burden? The words struck deep. He fell silent. Slowly, he rose. An idiot. That's what he called himself. Dolores had never once weighed her life against the risk. She had never hesitated to step forward. Yet here he was calculating, hesitating like an idiot. There was no choice. He would overcome everything, protect everything. That included her. He answered, nothing could be further from the truth. Since the moment she awakened alongside him, she had become something irreplaceable. A comrade. Someone he had sworn to protect, no matter the cost. He stepped forward, placing himself in front of her once more. His red eyes burned brighter than ever. This time, he would not fight alone. As the battle roared on, Dolores' thoughts drifted back to a distant memory. A younger version of herself ran through a sunlit church, calling out desperately. She found the Pope and threw herself into her arms. What's wrong? The Pope asked gently. Through tears, she spoke of a nightmare. A great evil swallowing the world. Endless suffering. Everyone trapped. What if it were real? What if her power was too weak to save anyone? The Pope smiled softly and wiped her tears away. Such a kind heart, she said. Even in her dreams, she thought only of others. She knelt and placed a hand on the girl's head. Her power might seem small now, but it would grow. Faith in God. Faith in herself, that was the source. No one else could give her that strength. It would be lonely, painful, but one day, when that faith connected with true trust in another, when she found someone who would walk beside her, her power would reach unimaginable heights. The memory faded. The present returned violent, deafening. The mountains of gold trembled. Belial roared, enough! A massive torrent of golden energy surged forward, spiraling into a destructive weight. It mocked them. Their power was meaningless. They could never stand against an endless tide of gold. Still, the Nighthound stood before the barrier. Dolores knelt behind him and began to pray. Her voice rang out clear, unwavering. God Luna strong. The Nighthound turned, stunned by the power rising from her. She clasped her hands, her voice steady. Luna is both shield and weapon, one who descends to save us from disaster. Her thoughts sharpened. She could not rely on herself alone. She would share his burden, become someone he could rely on. Her prayer deepened. She called for strength, not for herself, but for them both. It reached its peak. Then she spoke. If he truly trusted her, if he truly saw her as a comrade, then he had to tell her his name. Tears streamed down her face as golden light engulfed her entire body. She demanded it, the name of the one who stood before her, the name of the one she would fight beside. Silence fell. Even the storm seemed to hesitate. Then, a voice, quiet, unfamiliar. It cut through the roar of gold. From beneath the mask, he spoke one word, Van. Dolores' eyes snapped open. Shock froze her expression. She knew that voice. She knew that name. The golden light settled over him. The mask, the hood, they faded, revealing the face beneath. He turned toward her. His red eye met hers. Calm, sir, it was Van. Names held a mysterious power. Dolores, still reeling from everything that had happened, understood that merely speaking a person's name could influence the law of cause and effect and stir a strange energy that crossed the yin and yang dimensions. Remembering her desperate plea for the warrior's sacred name, she slowly closed her eyes. Then, with a strangely calm expression, she finally spoke the name that had been revealed to her. The instant the name left her lips, a massive explosion of pure golden divine energy burst out from them and swallowed the entire vault in blinding light. When that radiance finally began to fade, the demon Belial was still standing amid the ruins with a cruel smirk twisted across its face. It mocked the pair for being buried beneath a sea of gold, sneering that such an ending was probably the kind most humans would have desired. Then it went further, taunting them by saying that Saint Dolores had died after being taken hostage by the Nighthound, and that this was the story the world would be told. Yet even as Belial spoke, the endless sea of gold coins covering the floor began to tremble. The shaking grew more violent by the second, so violent that even the demon was caught off guard. Its arrogant expression broke into genuine shock as it demanded to know where the disturbance was coming from. A brilliant golden light surged out from beneath the mountains of treasure and continued to intensify. A single beat of sweat rolled down Belial's monstrous face as a terrible suspicion began to form in its mind. Then, in a display of overwhelming power, the mountains of coins exploded upward and split apart to both sides, opening a wide path through the center of the vault. Standing in the middle of that path, wrapped in the same piercing light, were Vicar and Dolores. Their eyes, one glowing red and the other marked with a holy cross, were filled with unwavering resolve. They stood together, fully awakened. Crimson auras stormed around Vicar, while Dolores radiated a blinding golden glow of her own. Belial screamed in disbelief the moment it understood what it was seeing. This was a true awakening. Completely confused, the demon roared that such a thing should not have been possible. That it simply could not be. The golden light pouring from Dolores was so intense that even Belial had to steady itself, bracing one clawed hand against the floor while shielding it was forced to admit that the searing brilliance before it was the genuine awakened light of the saints. But fear did not come first. Instead, a wide and twisted grin slowly spread across Bells. It stared at the awakened pair with a new and more terrifying interest, greed flickering openly in its eyes. In its mind, the power in front of it might have been worth even more than all the gold piled throughout the vault. Enraged by their awakened strength, Belial flew into a frenzied rage. It screamed that their awakening was impossible, bellowing that wealth and greed were the true rulers of the world. As long as human greed existed, money would remain king. There was nothing in existence, it ranted, that money could not accomplish, and nothing in the world that could shine brighter than gold. Vicar remained calm. He met the demon's burning gaze and quietly said that there were things money could never buy. As those words left him, fragments of his past flashed through his mind. The faces of his family. The bond he had forged with the Bolak, the bitterness of losing a comrade. The tearful final embrace of a loved one dissolving into light. Love, sacrifice, grief, and connection had shaped him into who he was. The bond between Vakir and Dolores shone brighter than any mountain because without something pure to reflect, gold was nothing more than a dull stone. As that truth settled in the air, Vakir's demonic dagger began to lengthen into a massive crystal blade made of pure red energy. He raised the weapon and pointed it directly at Belle, declaring that the demon would vanish before their light. Still defiant, Belial scoffed at their battered bodies and unleashed a massive wave of golden energy, roaring at them to stop spouting nonsense. As the attack rushed toward them, Vakir only tilted his head slightly. Dolores, bright and fearless, smiled as she told him not to worry about her. And this time, she did not call him by the false name he had hidden behind. She called him by his true name, accepting that trust. Vakir closed his eyes for a brief moment. With a new sense of partnership between them, he told her that he would return. Then he launched himself into the air and charged straight toward the massive dragon-like beast of pure golden energy that Belial had summoned. As he went, he called out her name, Dolores. Watching him throw himself into what should have been an impossible fight, Dolores felt no fear now. Her expression was full of fierce joy and unwavering faith as she clenched her fists, prepared to support him until the very end. And as Vakir flew toward the enemy, he felt the full weight of her blessing settle over him. The Sanctus's power sharpened and purified his aura more than ever before. The ultimate technique he had hesitated to use earlier, a skill he had never been fully confident in, no longer fell out of reach. A complex red magic symbol unfolded before him, glowing with power. This was not a simple amplification of his attacks. It was the ultimate sword art of the Baskerville family, the secret art of the Hound, created for one purpose alone, to kill demons. With the full power of the saint's blessing burning through his veins, Vicar unleashed the ultimate technique of his clan, the Baskervilles' eighth sword form. He descended upon the demon, his body erupting into a massive crystal construct of pure red energy. That ethereal construct took the shape of a gigantic and ferocious hound. Its jaws spread wide as it lunged toward the golden dragon conjured by Belle. The demon could only stare upward in utter disbelief as its own attack was dwarfed by the sheer size and savage presence of the secret art. For the first time, Belle, a top predator that had believed it ruled the world, felt real and mortal fear for its own vicar. His eyes blazing with unrestrained fury, declared that his purpose was simple. He existed to kill demons. The two colossal energy beasts, one forged from red demonic power and the other from golden greed, collided in a cataclysmic struggle. Their impact erupted into a massive explosion of red and pale gold light that tore through everything in its path. When the dust finally settled, the once opulent vault had become a landscape of utter ruin. At the center of a gigantic crater lay the broken and bleeding body of the demon. Blurring training side by side at the rim of that crater were Vicar and of Dolores. Their battle was finally over. Barely able to move, Belial coughed weakly. It was shocked to realize that its wounds were no longer healing, and that its strength was steadily draining away. It could not understand what was in its mind. Defeat should have been, even if that final strike had been, its power should not have been failing. Its power should not have been fading like this. There had to be another reason. Then its gaze shifted and locked onto the torn human corpse of Bartholomew Du Bois-Guait. In that instant, a horrifying realization dawned on it. Its power had never truly been tied to the physical gold inside the vault. It had been tied to the value humanity placed on that panicking. It tried to understand why that power was still collapsing. The scene then shifted outside the vault and revealed the true, devastating scale of their master plan. Chaos had erupted across the streets of the capital. Bags of gold coins and bundles of currency had been thrown everywhere. Men working under Damien Du Bois gleefully scattered money into the air, plunging the entire city into an economic crisis. From a high balcony, two figures looked down over the pandemonium as the sun sank toward the horizon. Their plan had reached its climax. An official report laid out the catastrophic damage in plain terms. An emergency bulletin warned of hyperinflation after a massive amount of mysterious and counterfeit currency had been distributed throughout the capital. Trust in money had collapsed, and with that trust, its value had plunged. Damien Du Bois read the document with grim satisfaction. His part of the plan had succeeded. The full strategy now became clear. Using his authority as director of the Imperial Mint, Damien had forged an enormous volume of currency. At the same time, Cindy Wendy, the master merchant, had used her vast trade network to spread that money across the empire, shattering the economy and breaking the very idea of money's value. On the balcony overlooking the collapsing city, Cindy Wendy held a report detailing the financial. She turned Damien de Bourgeois with a sly smile and admitted that although she had joined the scheme because of a debt she owed the Night Hound, she still wondered why a man of his rank would accept such a dangerous plan. Damien stared out at the burning horizon with a grave expression. He explained that the Night Hound had done something for him that no amount of money or treasure in the world could ever have accomplished. By borrowing the Nighthound's strength, he had finally been able to exact the revenge on his own family that he had longed for. For that, he had been willing to sacrifice everything. Cindy crossed her arms and said she understood because she had once been in a similar position herself. The two of them agreed that they had allied themselves with a truly fearsome man. Damien then added that the chaos they had unleashed was only temporary. Because the counterfeit money had been created with magic, its effect would likely last only about an hour. But for someone like the Nighthound, that brief window was already more than enough time to decide the fate of the back in the ruined vault. Viker stood over the broken body of Bartholomew. Glancing upward, he noted that their hour had to be over by now. The demon, stripped of its source of power, was helpless. There were no gold coins left for it to absorb, and its ability to regenerate had already vanished. With Dolores standing behind him, Viker approached the defeated demon. His red dagger glowed with lethal intent. He declared that all of Belle's wealth was worthless now and told it to prepare for execution. To his surprise, the dying Bartholomew let out a weak chuckle, and a crooked smirk twisted across his bloodied face. With Dolores watching anxiously from behind, Vakir narrowed his eyes and asked what could possibly be so funny at a time like this. The demon's expression stretched into a crazed grin as it asked whether they had really believed it would come there without making preparations of its own. At once a massive and intricate purple magic circle erupted beneath their feet. Its symbols flared to life and trapped Vakir and Dolores within its boundary. With what little breath remained in him, Bartholomew revealed his final terrifying spell. He explained that everything in the world had a corresponding value. This curse was the price that had to be paid for killing him, and that price could only be paid with death itself. Then he named that ultimate curse of equivalent exchange: indulgence. Furious at the demon's final trick, Dolores shouted back in defiance. She declared that killing a demon could never be a sin and demanded that he stop spouting such absurd nonsense. But Bartholomew only chuckled from within the circle. He mockingly explained that even demons were creations of God, and that, as a saintess, she should have known better than anyone that killing any of God's creations was a sin. He gloated, utterly confident that no one would be foolish enough to sacrifice a life merely to kill him. That arrogance did not last. Vakir calmly stepped forward and held a piece of paper right in front of Bartholomew's face. He told him that the price for killing a pig like him had already been paid. Then he revealed the document in full, a fancy and official-looking parchment. It was an indulgence, a holy paper that granted forgiveness for all the sins of a faithful believer. The document had been formally issued and guaranteed by the Old Testament faction of the church, the same faction Bartholomew had been working with. The demon could only stare in total and speechless shock. In a single instant, the tables turned with the sin already absolved. The curse of indulgence no longer had any price left to claim. Seizing the moment, Vakir raised his glowing red blade. As the demon let out one last desperate cry, he swung in a decisive arc and cleanly separated Bartholomew's head from his body. The head fell, struck the floor of the crater with a dull thud, and rolled away until it came to a stop at the feet of a small and unexpected figure. From the edge of the crater, Vakir and Dolores looked down, and a new chill spread through both of them. Standing at the bottom of the crater, right beside the fallen head of the demon lord, was their friend Sinclair. Both of them stared at her in disbelief. But the Sinclair standing there was not the cheerful girl they knew. Her face was buried in deep shadow, and her eyes glowed with a menacing, corrupted purple light as she loomed over the dead demon. Her presence alone felt impossible to explain and utterly terrifying. Claire finally revealed how she had ended up inside the vault. At first, she said, everything had felt like a dream. After waking from strange sleep, she found herself staring at a scene so surreal that her mind could not accept it at once. From where she hid, Sinclair watched a terrifying battle unfold. A monster with a pig's head was fighting her friend, Vice President Dolores, who was wrapped in a bright light, as well as the mysterious Nighthound. The creature looked exhausted after taking a powerful blow from the Nighthound, and before Sinclair could make sense of it, it changed back into then the Nighthound's sword fell without hesitation. In a single brutal stroke, he cut the man's head off. The severed head rolled across the ground and stopped right at Sinclair's feet. And in that instant, the truth struck her. What stood before her was not some twisted dream. It was reality, cold and merciless. Dolores and Victor looked down into the crater and saw Sinclair standing there, frozen in shock. Panic seized Dolores first. She turned to Victoire in disbelief and demanded to know why Sinclair was there at all. She remembered her own plan clearly. She had given Sinclair tea mixed with a sleeping potion, confirmed that she was asleep, and sent both her and Piggy back to the academy. Sinclair being inside the vault should have been impossible. Still trying to understand the nightmare before her, Sinclair lowered her gaze to the severed head and quietly asked what was going on. Then she looked up at the two figures standing at the edge of the crater, her mind full of confused questions. She could not understand why the vice president was standing beside the Night Hound, or why the Night Hound was there with the head of the Beecham family. Her voice trembled with panic as she asked what any of this meant. And while she questioned them, her eyes, half hidden behind her fingers, began to glow with a strange and corrupted purple. The fear in her voice was plain, but something darker was beginning to rise with it. Seeing her friend on the verge of breaking apart, Dolores rushed down into the crater and grabbed Sinclair by the shoulders. She begged her not to look at the head, and pleaded with her to look only at her instead, promising that she would explain everything. Dolores admitted that she did not know when Sinclair had woken up or how much she had seen, but at that moment, all she wanted was to calm her terrified, but Sinclair did not accept her comfort. Her eyes burned with that menacing purple light, and her face twisted with rage as she violently shoved Dolores' hand away. She screamed at her not to come any closer, and the sudden fury in her voice left Dolores completely startled, and from the edge of the crater, Viker, still hidden beneath the disguise of the Night Hound, watched the scene tighten into something dangerous. He quickly realized how little time they had left. He warned Dolores that the vault doors could open at any moment and told her that she needed to leave. Dolores turned back to Sinclair anyway. Her concern for her friend was stronger than the warning, and she tried to reason with her as gently as she could. She told Sinclair it was dangerous to remain there and pleaded with her to leave together. Sinclair answered with a chilling accusation. She asked whether they were not the most dangerous people in the room. If she stayed behind and told the world what she had seen, then they would have every reason to silence her. Seeing the situation sliding further out of control, Viker stepped between them and shielded Dolores. He took the full blame upon himself and created a cover story on the spot. He declared that he was the one who had killed the head of the bourgeois family and that the Santis, knowing nothing of his plan, had merely been his hostage. That, he said, was the official story they would tell. His words did nothing to calm Sinclair. A bright turquoise magic circle formed in her hand as she prepared to fight. With fury blazing in her eyes, she challenged him directly and asked whether he planned to kill her, too, in order to keep her silent. As he faced that unexpected threat, Viker's thoughts turned inward. From the memories that remained from before his regression, he knew the facts about she was supposed to become a legendary figure, a genius and an elite student who would one day vanish after graduation and leave almost no trace behind in history. But that cold knowledge collided with the Sinclair he knew in this timeline. He remembered her cheerful greetings, her easy friendship with Piggy, and the smile that belonged only to her. More than that, he remembered the way she had tearfully called him Yun, overwhelmed with joy that he had returned safely. Those memories made the decision before him darker than it should have been. In silence, he weighed the question that now stood in front of his mission. Should he leave her alive? Or if she had become a danger to everything, should he end it here and now? The air inside the crater grew heavy with the killing intent he never voiced aloud. Sensing that shift at once, she called out to him, her voice sharp with fear. Night Hound. Before the standoff could go any further, the massive vault doors began to creak open. Bright light poured into the chamber as the heavy doors swung wide, cutting through the tension inside the crater. Sinclair still stood there with her turquoise shield raised directly at the battered Night Hound. A group of guards and aides appeared in the doorway, their figures thrown into sharp relief by the light behind them. One of them pointed in shock and shouted that the infamous criminal, the Night Hound, was inside the vault. Panic spread at once as the guard demanded to know why he was there and ordered everyone to make sure the patriarch was. Their frantic cries were interrupted by a booming voice demanding to know what all the noise was about. The guards turned and saw Damien de Bourgeois striding toward them with his own men behind him. They were stunned by his sudden arrival and could not understand how he had managed to get there. Damien's eyes widened the moment he saw the scene within the vault. His gaze fell upon the grim sight on thee, and he instantly recognized the severed head of his brother, Bartholomew. A silent understanding passed through him then. The Night Hound had succeeded. Vakir said nothing. Behind the mask, his expression remained. Damien drew in a steadying breath and put the final stage of their plan into motion. He pointed dramatically into the vault and shouted that an assassination had taken place. Then he publicly declared the cover story they had prepared in advance. The Night Hound had taken the Saintess hostage and murdered the patriarch. After that, Damien pointed directly at Vakir and ordered the troops to be gathered. He commanded his men to save the Saintess and arrest the criminal with the guard's attention now fixed on him. Vakir turned to make his escape. But Sinclair blocked his path, her magic shield still raised. She shouted at him to stop and demanded to know where he thought he was going.